working on a 1960 Series 62 Cadillac, and as you can see here on the floor, we have a bunch of fluids that are leaking out. So over the next couple of videos, you're going to see what we did to solve these fluid leaks, and the first one that we're going to address is the transmission pan gasket. The first step to changing your transmission pan is to drain the fluid, and on this vehicle the pan has a drain plug and it is a 7/8 socket. So we'll go ahead and pop it loose and then drain it into our reservoir. So we can already see that we have some gasket material flaking off, which is probably not helping us with the leak that we have been experiencing. So I'm going to go ahead and raise this lid up so we don't spill anything and get to draining. We're also going to capture a little bit of the transmission fluid so that we can shine a light on it and make sure that we don't have any crazy debris. So I'm going to go ahead and let it start to drain out, and then I'm going to steal a small sample. And then while the rest of it drains, I'll shine a light through it to see if any sort of debris comes through. And this looks incredibly clean, nearly brand new. So the fluid has almost completely drained out of the pan. We're going to remove this heat shield here, which covers the cables for the transmission. And once we have those removed, we'll be able to remove the 1/2-inch bolts all around the pan and lower the pan so that we can replace the gasket. So I'm just going to go ahead and reach up top here at the front, at the very front of the bell housing. This right here is the inspection cover. So we're just going to take this first bolt out. And they shouldn't be on very tight. So we're just gonna take this guy out, and then we're gonna grab the next one that's holding it on, which is right here. And we'll go ahead and slip it out. So this is just a heat shield pan, and now we can remove the remaining bolts, and what we'll go ahead and do is we'll leave this one in here. We'll undo it a little bit but leave it in to catch the pan so that the pan doesn't flop everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and start removing these. So we're going to go ahead and remove the pan now. We have 2 bolts securing it so that the pan doesn't just completely flop out. But we're going to use a flathead screwdriver and pry it between the pan and the transmission body. And that will help us get our clearance, whatever. You can just cut it out. There we go. Alright, and that's why we still have a bolt engaged, because there's still more fluid and we wanted it to drop down correctly. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and support the pan and then remove the last bolt that was holding it in position. And then lower down the pan. Alright, the next step to do is to remove the old gasket, which is very brittle and breaking apart, which is probably why it was leaking. And we'll clean all this up and add our new gasket. So if you've gotten this far and you wanted to service your transmission by changing the transmission filter, all you would have to do is lift this guy up a little bit and then slip it down and wiggle it out, and I'll show you how it connects. So you have your grommet here and then your receiving tube, and what happens is transmission fluid gets sucked into here and goes through here, enters into this tube, and then goes through the transmission. And what holds this in place is there's a little tab right here, which you can see if you come to the back of the transmission, and this just sits right inside here and holds it in position. And there you go. Okay, so we're just inspecting our pan here. We've wiped it off, but now we're going to use a little abrasive and try to remove some of this rust here. This rust creates pitting, and pitting means that you can have leaking. So we're just going to go ahead and try to clean some of it up, scuff some of it up, so that we have the rest of the pan looking like this, so that when we put our gasket back on, we don't have any leaks. So as you can see here, we have what we've just cleaned and we have what's original, and this rust creates a pitting which allows for transmission fluid to seep through. And now we're just scraping the pan to remove any paint. So where the transmission pan meets the transmission, we put a gasket maker there. This is an anaerobic gasket maker. It holds really well against the newer transmission solvents that we have today. And the reason we put this on is because the pitting from the rust is going to create a small leak. We actually had a really difficult time getting that gasket material to seal. So what we ended up having to do was remove the pan again, make sure that it was perfectly flat and true, and then we put it back together using the same process that we did there, but with a slightly different gasket material. So now we'll just go ahead and lay our new gasket over top of this, and we'll be able to bolt it on to the transmission. So we're just going to go ahead and put our pan on, and we're just going to put one bolt in to start. And we're not going to put it on tight, we're just going to kind of lock it into position. And getting some threads started. And now I'm going to grab my other bolt and do the same thing. Just so you guys know, all I'm doing is snugging the bolts up. I'm not really worried about doing the torque on this. The torque is 13 foot-pounds. All I want to do is snug it up so that the gaskets would all be on there flat. When you do the final torque though, you'll start from the inner bolts and then work your way out. That way if there's a wrinkle, it'll have the opportunity to escape. So I'm just, like I said, I'm not even putting maybe a foot-pound on these. I'm just literally putting them up so that they are touching flat. And then we'll go ahead and do the final torque. So if you have a drain plug and it's leaking a little bit, what you can do is install an O-ring so that on the mating surface, this will seal it. Just make sure that you have something that is designed to be used with the harsh chemicals of transmission fluid, because if it's not, it will get eaten away. So a Viton O-ring would be a really good one, as well as to make sure that it can function in the temperatures that the transmission will be operating in. I'm just going to go ahead and snug this guy up. And then I'm going to grab my ratchet. And this should be tightened up to pretty tight, between probably 30 and 40 foot-pounds. We're just looking at the transmission fluid sample that we pulled from the transpan when we were draining it, and everything looks really good. We don't see any crazy metal flake. We don't have any sort of material buildup, and as you can see, it's a nice color, good consistency. You don't have any crazy blobs coming out, and nothing settled down here at the bottom. So this is kind of the best case scenario you'll ever see. This means that recently someone probably did a drain and fill on this transmission, and you know, they when they put the transmission gasket back on, they may have just over tightened the gasket a little bit, or the car's been sitting for years. So not really sure, but the trans fluid looks really good. Okay, so we've just finished retorquing the transpan, and one thing to consider is when you're using the anaerobic gasket maker on either side of your gasket material, you need to let it sit for at least 24 hours, because anaerobic means that it cures in the presence of no oxygen. So there needs to be a lack of oxygen in order for it to cure. So if you put it on your finger and you let it sit there for a day, it'll still be tacky, it won't ever firm up. So wipe away all the excessive gasket material so that it can cure itself up, and you'll be good to go. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.